The board is present. The State Board of Education meeting of September 12, 2023 is called to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of agenda and order of priority. Are there any items that board members would like to add or delete from the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the agenda and add a resolution titled Keeping Kids Safe and Stable under item P.
Motion by Ms. Snyder. We have support from Mr. McMillan. Is there any discussion? Ms. Snyder, to you.
Yes, I'd like to read the resolution into the record, and just the reasoning for us entertaining this today is just that there are various parts of the country that are reintroducing mask mandates and recommendations. And so I do wish to revisit the issue as a board together collectively.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Ms. Snyder has shared her rationale for introducing the resolution. Any other discussion on the issue of placing the resolution on the agenda? Any other discussion? Hearing Dr. Pugh?
You know what, I wasn't going to say anything when I saw it. I have not read through everything. I do see misinformation in this. I also don't know. To me, it just seems like it's dredging up. It's an opportunity to dredge up an argument and more drama. I will say that I just left the emergency room where my father is there with COVID. So absolutely not. I will not be voting to put this on the agenda. I think that it is, again, just an opportunity to dredge up an argument that isn't even worth having right now.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pugh. Mr. Bullock.
I didn't see it till this morning, so I don't know when it came in. However, the glance through reminded me of all of the COVID arguments we had when I was in the chamber, mask mandates, herd immunity, all these things that seem ridiculous while my family and friends were actually dying. So I just don't get us, President Pugh said we're rehashing a wound that doesn't need to be reopened. COVID is real. That's, so.
Very.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Bullock. Mr. McMillan.
Well, I do think that there's a place for something like this because we know it's factual now that, and what I was saying all along, that kids did not need to suffer as the regime put them through. It was clear the CDC for a year made it clear that COVID was not as bad as the flu. I kept harping on it. They eventually took it down. I don't know if too many people were pointing out something that was harmful to the argument of those who want to control people, but it was clear that kids were not. The facts at post-COVID or post the difficult times make it clear that it was a certain segment that you had. Those with comorbidities were the ones that were at risk and that children were not. And yet we are dealing with the aftermath of the outrageous and wrong-headed regime that was put in place for kids, against kids. And so, and again, this was talking about mandates. Certainly if parents are persuaded that it's best for, masks, that there was never a concern that those should happen. But it was clear that all along, it's undeniable that children did not need to be masked, to be disrupted, to be not available at school, to go online, all these things. And so I think there's an interest in getting ahead of the curve and making sure that kids are not harmed again by this, by people who want to control and other nefarious reasons. So I think that some statement, whether it's exactly this or some form of this, I think is wise.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McMillan. Ms. Snyder, and Ms. Lipton.
I am going to respond to some of the comments that have been said. With all due respect to our board members here at the table, I've served in healthcare nearly 2 decades. And the pandemic and the concept of COVID and how it played out through COVID dollars in our bureaucratic bodies is a layer of bureaucratic control that I have been exposed to a lot longer, dating back to when I worked for a very large public hospital that utilized CMS and financial incentive to require nurses to get vaccination for the flu or else wear a mask. So long before we entertained this policy, it existed in CMS and hospitals. It then became an issue with COVID when it became a pandemic. And we called it a brand new virus. It was not a brand new virus. It's been around for decades. It was around when I was in nursing school. And then we used it as a means of saying, get the vaccine or you'll lose your job and you won't be able to put food on the table. We use mask mandates in the same concept. Be willing to wear a mask or you won't have access to education. So this is not drudging up old drama. This is something that, again, from the experience I've had that I can bring to the board table, has been around for a very long time, has not gone away just because it isn't politically serving you in a particular moment. It's very real. It's continuing to pop up. It's being reintroduced in other states and in other school districts across the country. And Michigan has an opportunity to say, absolutely not. We're not going to bring it back. We're not going to reintroduce failed pandemic policies like our governor did. Again, Michigan led the nation in school shutdowns for mask mandates and these types of things. We also suffer the greatest in nursing shortages and teacher shortages as a result of this failed pandemic policy. I am not going to stop talking about it. I'm going to continue to bring it to our table until we're willing to say this harmed our kids and we're not going to do it again.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lipton?
Just, Mr. Chair, I'm trying to look to see, I think I received this outside of the 24-hour window that we have all agreed on, would give the minimum amount of time to review, but I don't see a time stamp. Could you just remind me when the board received this resolution?
Ms. Evans?
108 yesterday.
108 yesterday.
That's
okay,
correct.
So
9:29 would be before the 24-hour mark.
Just stating to my colleagues that we do have a rule, informal, but I know that I have worked very hard to adhere to it, as I know many of my colleagues have, to allow for a minimum of 24 hours to review. I follow the rules. I would ask that my colleagues do, and on that basis, I think that this was filed too late for consideration, and I do believe that not only is it late to the table procedurally, but I think it's, as a policy, late to the table in terms of where we are in education in Michigan. So on that basis, I'll be voting no.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Lipton. Ms. Snyder, Dr. Pugh, and to a vote.
I respect that informal rule. It was presented to the board with our last session with President Ulbrich. We all voted yes on it last month. There was a resolution that was introduced well after 9:30 as well. So if we're going to make rules, then we need to be consistent with who follows them and not expect other people to follow rules that we don't follow ourselves. So this is a very short resolution. It's simple, and I would like to read it into the record at this time if that's acceptable to you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm happy to read it into the record, and then I'm even happier to vote on whether it'll be placed on the agenda or not. Ms. Snyder, please. Read it into the record if you would, please. I'm fine with her reading it into the record. Listen,
Okay.
but yeah.
Keeping kids safe and stable resolution. Whereas schools in various parts of the country have returned to failed mask-related pandemic policy and started to recommend or even mandate masks for students and teachers. Whereas research shows masks meant for large droplets are not effective in protecting the transfer of COVID in large groups or crowds. Whereas research shows students and their ability to learn are negatively affected by the wearing of masks in classrooms and schools. Whereas Michigan students cannot afford additional distractions, destruction, or interference in their education. Whereas recommending masks creates a culture of division in schools between teachers and students and families of differing ideology, dividing people into groups that mask and those that do not. Whereas this division cultivates an environment where students and families do not have equal access to education if they do not practice the prescribed ideology of their local school district. Whereas recognition of parental rights in education and forging a partnership rooted in these rights and in favor of positive student outcomes is the foundation of rebuilding trust in public education post-pandemic. Whereas schools are not community health organizations and do not have the jurisdiction to provide medical direction to families and students. Be it resolved that individual schools, school districts, intermediate school districts, and the Michigan Department of Education is strongly encouraged to adopt a no medical mandate culture, including the recommendation of masking of students in the context of school or extracurricular school-based activities. And you can see in the footnote evidence base for each one of those statements.
Thank you very much, Ms. Snyder. Dr. Pugh.
I want to first say that the only other resolution that I see that will be proposed for to amend the agenda is one that I submitted, and it was definitely sent over before 9:30. What I also want to point out here, because Ms. Snyder talked about what is real. What is real is that COVID is still here. What is real is that this document has misinformation. What is real is that we have thousands of children who have been orphaned in this state as a result of COVID. What is real is I just left my father at a hospital who was transported at 2 a.m. this morning and diagnosed with COVID. That is very real. What is real is that there are still people who want to spread misinformation. What is real is that this is an old tactic to drum up a base and to get some attention. And again, I vote no on this.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Evans, if we could have a roll call vote on the placement of Ms. Snyder's resolution on the agenda.
Bullock.
Negative.
Lipton.
No.
McMillan.
Yes.
Pritchett.
No.
Pugh.
Absolutely no.
Robinson.
No.
Snyder.
Yes.
And Tilly.
No.
Motion fails.
Board members, are there any other motions that individuals would like to add? Dr. Pugh?
This is resolution in support for Senate and House bills for family leave optimal coverage, FLAC. And this is really a continuation or another part of amendment or a resolution that we passed that is in support of paid sick leave. As some may recall, in May, we voted.
If you could just move it and we could get a
Yes.
second, and
I'm
then
sorry.
we could go to discussion.
I'm so
So
sorry.
we've got no, it's all good. So we've got a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Bullock. Dr. Pugh, to you for discussion.
Yes, as I was mentioning, we voted before for a judicial movement in the Supreme Court. This is legislation now that has been proposed by Senator Geis as well as Helena Scott that actually supports paid sick leave and supports the resolution that we passed in May.
So we have a motion, we have a second, we've had some discussion on the motion. Any other discussion on the motion being added to the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote, Ms. Evans.
Bullock.
Yes.
Lipton.
Yes.
McMillan.
No.
Pritchett.
Yes.
Pugh. Robinson.
Yes.
Snyder. And Tilly. Motion carries.
Thank you. At this time, Ms. Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce the members.
Agenda.
I beg your pardon. Getting a little ahead of myself. If I could have a motion to move the agenda as amended.
So move.
Moved by Dr. Pritchett. Do I have a second? Supported by Dr. Pugh. Any discussion thereon? Hearing none, if we could have a roll call vote.
Bullock,
Yes.
Lifton,
Yes.
McMillan,
No.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
No.
and Tilly.
Yes.
Motion carries.
At this time, Ms. Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce the members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You have just been listening to Dr. Michael Rice, Chairperson of the Board and State Superintendent. To his left around the table, our Board President, Dr. Pamela Pugh from Saginaw, Board Co-Vice President, Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton from Huntington Woods, NASB Delegate, Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, Ms. Nikki Snyder from Dexter, and Ms. Candace Jackson, the Michigan Teacher of the Year from Detroit Public Schools Community District. Seated behind them is Board Co-Vice President, Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield. Back to the table to my right are Mr. Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer, Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, and Board Secretary, Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Virtually, we have joining us today Ms. Stephanie O'Day, the Governor's K-12 Policy Advisor ex officio.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. The public may register to provide comment during the public participation portion of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 1 p.m. today. To provide public comment by telephone, please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage, www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed on the MDE webpage, again at www.michigan.gov/MDE. Today we will start our meeting with a back-to-school video. In this video, we will see the smiling faces of young people from the families of staff and the Michigan Department of Education as they return for the 2023-2024 school year. Thank you to the MDE staff who helped to create this video. Very good. That was terrific. Help remind us why we're here, board.
That's right.
Well, we're going to pivot to two presentations. The first presentation will feature information on Spring 2023 State Summative results. The presenters will share results from the MSTEP, PSAT, and SAT assessments. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Delsa Chapman, Deputy Superintendent in the Division of Educator, Student, and School Supports, and Andy Middlestead, Director in the Office of Educational Assessment and Accountability. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice, and good morning, board. During this presentation today, we will discuss test results from last spring's MSTEP and Michigan Merit exam. Last spring, Michigan students were administered the state summative assessments to measure their progress toward achieving proficiency on Michigan's state content standards. You'll see noted here, Michigan students performed better in spring 23 than in spring 2022 in most grades and in most subjects. In total, our spring results exceeding spring 22 results in 15 of 20 categories, were lower in 4 of 20 categories, and were the same in one singular category. Testing requirements over time. You may recall that for 2 years, administration of state tests was interrupted due to the untimely pandemic. 2023 marks the second year of returning to a required full administration of our assessments or tests. In 2023, over 95% of our students participated in state assessments. And now to share specifics on our content areas, Andy Middlestead, Director of the Office of Educational Assessments and Accountability. Andy?
Good morning, board. I'm happy to be here for what has become my annual September presentation on test results. Like Dr. Chapman said, I'm going to walk us through some of the overall results for mathematics first, and then I'll move into English language arts. So the MSTEP mathematics assessments were administered in grades 3 through 7, and in 2023 we saw gains in proficiency from 2022 in all MSTEP mathematics grades 3 through 7. In 8th grade, we used the PSAT 8-9 as our math and English language arts assessment, and we also saw an increase there in 2023 from 2022. The SAT is our exam in 11th grade for our high school students for math and ELA, and we saw a slight decrease there that you'll see in the following slides as I walk through these. This slide has the MSTEP mathematics results for grades 3 through 7. As I noted, we see gains in proficiency points from all grades 3 through 7. PSAT 8-9 exam is our 8th grade exam that we use. We saw a slight gain there from 22 to 23. And again, the SAT is our test that we use in 11th grade as part of the Michigan Merit exam for the mathematics portion, and we saw a 1/10 of a percentage point decrease from 22 to 23. Transitioning to English language arts, we use the same assessments in each of the grade levels I noted before. We use MSTEP in grades 3 through 7, PSAT 8-9 in 8th grade, and the SAT in 11th grade. For grades 3 through 7, the MSTEP English language arts were administered. In 2023, we saw gains in proficiency scores from 22 in grades 4 and 5, and we saw decreases in grades 3, 6, and 7. In the PSAT 8-9 for 8th grade, the proficiency results remained steady from 22 to 23. And for 11th graders that took the SAT, we saw an increase of proficiency scores. This is our table for MSTEP ELA in grades 3 through 7. As I noted, you'll see grades 4 and 5 had an increase, and we saw decreases for students in grades 3, 6, and 7. The PSAT 8-9 for our 8th graders remained steady from 22 to 23. And for our 11th grade students for the SAT, their scores increased in proficient points from 22 to 23. We're going to shift gears to social studies. We have an M-STEP social studies exam. These exams are administered in grades 5, 8, and 11. And we saw gains in proficiency in each of these 3 grade levels where social studies exams are administered. And this is the table with those numbers. Similar to social studies, the M-STEP science is administered in grades 5, 8, and 11 as well. And we also saw gains in proficiency there in each of our science grade levels. So now I'm going to transition back to Dr. Chapman for a few slides.
Thank you, Andy, for sharing the results on our content-specific areas for those assessments. As we move into particular subgroups, focusing on demographics and other measures within those groups, we would like to remind ourselves the pandemic had a particular impact on our youngest learners, specifically those students enrolled in grades K, kindergarten, first or second grade, during the 3-year time span of 2020, 2021, or 2022. Having those foundational critical years disrupted or interrupted by the pandemic, where the building blocks of reading are formed and other learning characteristics, did not come without costs to some of our youngest learners. Here we'll see in mathematics, from 22 to 23, we saw an increase in proficiency in both economically disadvantaged students and non-economically disadvantaged students. Relative to our ethnic groups, we saw primarily increases in proficiency in all groups as noted here on the slide. A slight decline, however, for our Asian students. For 2023, specific to students with disabilities, we saw increases in proficiency for both students with disabilities and students without disabilities. Still focusing on mathematics, for 2022 to 2023, we saw increases in proficiency for both our non-English learner students and our English learner students. In regards to gender, we saw increases in proficiency for both female and male students. Now transitioning to ELA, or English Language Arts, and we'll go back with that first subgroup that we shared, focusing on economically disadvantaged and non-economically disadvantaged. We saw an increase in proficiency for our economically disadvantaged students and a decrease for non-economically disadvantaged students. So for both of those groups. In regards to ethnicity, we saw some increases and decreases, as you see noted here on the slides, focusing on the far right of the data presented. We would like to highlight and note that in regards to those groups, we saw a larger increase for our Black or African American students. As it relates to students with disabilities, for 2022 to 2023, we saw slight increases in proficiency for both students with disabilities and students without disabilities. Relative to English learners, for the period of 2022 to 2023, we saw a slight increase in proficiency, as noted here on the slide, focusing again on those columns to the far right of the data presented, and a decrease for English learner students. And finally, for our subgroups, focusing on gender, for English language arts, we saw a slight decrease in proficiency for female students and a slight increase for male students. And now we will transition back to Andy for some very specific information as it relates to the comparison of remote learning versus in-person learning, and how we sought out and reviewed the impact of data thereof. Andy?
All right, so we are on slide 27, and what we're going to do is something a little different. We haven't presented at the board before, but over the past couple of years, like Dr. Chapman had noted, we've been trying to look at the impact of remote learning during the 2020-21 school year and its possible impact on students in the years coming out of the pandemic. So for the purposes of the next two slides we're going to talk about, when we say remote districts or remote learning, we are talking about districts that self-identified that they were conducting 100% remote instruction for 9 months of the 2020-21 school year. So that's essentially the whole school year these districts identified that they were doing remote instruction. There are a number of districts out there that maybe were doing remote instruction for 6 months or 7 months or 4 months, which is still significant, but they are not part of this analysis. In this analysis, they are part of what we call the in-person districts. Right. So we're just talking about the schools that were 100% remote based on that 9-month rule. So we're first going to be looking at a mathematics slide, and what we see here are proficiency rates for the districts or PSAs that identified as remote, and also those that were thus in person. And we're looking at the change from the 2019 to the 23 school year, and then from the last 22 to 23. So this first slide in mathematics, we see that there's a steeper decline in proficiency rates for remote districts in grades 3, 4, and 5. In grades 6 and 7, we see a steeper decline for the in-person districts. However, when we start to look at what we could call recovery between 22 and 23, the remote districts in each of the grade levels are showing a greater increase in their proficiency scores rather than the in-person districts. If we transition to the English language arts, we see a similar trend in what's happening in comparing these remote districts versus in-person districts. Again, from 19 to 23, we see a steeper decline for the remote noted districts in grades 3 through 5. And in grades 6 and 7, we see a steeper decline for those districts that were in person. However, again, the recovery is greater between 22 and 23 for those districts that identified themselves as being primarily remote in that 2020-21 school year. So in looking at these data over the past couple of years, we are seeing the combination of students that were predominantly remote for that year of 2020-21. They may be from a more predominantly economically disadvantaged area, and if they were in our youngest grade levels during the pandemic, the kindergartners, first and second graders, like Dr. Chapman noted, if they were disrupted during those primary reading years, we call it, where students are learning to read, these students seem to be the most negatively impacted by the pandemic over these last several years. Again, so those are the students that may have been primarily remote during that school year, from an economically disadvantaged area and in those younger grade levels. Back to Dr. Chapman.
Thanks, Sandy. In summary, we would like to highlight that our students' performance for spring 2023 has a good outlook. In particular, Michigan students performed better than the previous spring of 2022 in most grades and in most subjects. Looking at the total picture, spring 2023 results exceeded spring 2022 in 15 of 20 categories. Additionally, as earlier shared, were lower in 4 of 20 categories and were the same in one category. Again, we thank you for the opportunity to share results today and will entertain questions and commentary in that regard. Dr. Rice?
Thank you, Dr. Chapman, Mr. Middlestead. Dr. Robinson.
Two quick questions. On slide 27, and I may have misheard this, but I thought I heard, Scott, you say that the remote districts had a steeper improvement than the in-person in math? And I'm not seeing that.
In math, in some of the grade levels, yes. So they see a steeper improvement for the
Right,
remote.
in the fourth grade,
Fourth grade.
which,
Yes,
okay.
the gain is, if you look at the English language arts, that gain is greater.
Right, but
So
I was looking at.
I may have misspoke for the
Yeah, I'm looking at
mathematics
slide 27, and I
Yep.
thought I heard you say that that the remote districts had a greater gain than the in-person, and I see the fourth grade number is higher,
Yep.
but I think
You're
all
right.
of the
And
others.
it's the only one.
Is
I
the
misspoke.
only one.
Yep.
Okay.
And then I guess my other question is, this is a lot of numbers, right, and a lot of stats. It would be helpful to know, for me, when I see, these very slight changes between 22, 23, or whatever it is, I'm curious about how many kids we're talking about for each one of those grades. So, a 0.1 increase, it might be really meaningful, and it might not be. So I guess my larger question is, and I'm sure you have this data, which of these results are statistically significant? Because there's a difference between there's an improvement here, and when we really look at the data, which of these gains or decreases are statistically meaningful, and then why did they occur, and what are we going to do to capture those results with other populations? The other nagging doubt about 27 is, and maybe I'm, again, not reading this correctly, but it looks like the remote districts started with much lower proficiency rates. So I would think that should be something that we fold into these results as well. If you make a 1-point gain when you were 20 points lower in proficiency anyway, is that as meaningful as a 1-point gain for the other districts?
So, Andy Middlestead, would you like to address those questions?
Yes, I can address several of them. You're certainly right. The remote districts did start in a lower place to begin with. So it's not as if we're looking at their coming up or approaching where the in-person districts are noted, because they are still farther behind than the in-person districts, certainly. We were just noting that their rate of increase, even from a lower bar, was greater. And yes, we can work in these presentations to add some more flags around statistical significance and things like that, because you're right, a 1/10 of a percentage point difference, is that something to wave a flag one way or another about? It may not be, because of, you're right, these things ebb and flow over the years, but we can certainly add some detail around that so that we can note what might be more significant than others, certainly.
Why don't we peel it back a little bit for our board? On average, how many young people do we test per grade?
On average, for each grade level, there's about 105,000 students.
Very good. So a 1 percentage point increase is more than 1,000 kids increased at proficiency. So that gives you a sense. When we look at these outside of a pandemic, we're not overly impressed by 1/10 of a percentage point or 2/10 of a percentage point. When you start getting up above a 0.5 percentage point or up into a percentage point, you're talking about bigger numbers. A 0.5 percentage point, 500 kids, a percentage point, 1,000 kids. And that doesn't speak to what's going on below the bar, because there can be an enormous amount going on, enormous amount of improvement going on in reading capacity below that proficiency bar, as Ms. Jackson knows, as Dr. Pepin knows. So it's not all about the bar. You can have substantial ability to read and still be under that proficiency bar on this high bar assessment. Other questions? I'm just, let's stay with Dr. Robinson. I want to make sure we did justice to his questions.
Yes, I would still be interested in future reports, kind of maybe an asterisk or a bullet or something, which of the results are statistically significant.
Very good. Okay. And you should note that we have said, by putting these slides 27 and 28 together, we're saying that there is a relationship among pre-pandemic poverty, remoteness, and post-pandemic results, particularly if you were in the reading window, K-1-2, in March of 20, when the pandemic hit. You good for the moment, Dr. Robinson? Bless you.
Yeah.
Ms. Snyder.
This presentation could not be more timely with the resolution I just tried to present to our board. Pandemic policies failed students in Michigan. More specifically, pandemic policy failed large swaths of students significantly. And this data shows that very clearly in a statistical significant way. So if we just look at page 3 for M-STEP test results for math, and then again on 5 for ELA, pre-pandemic proficiency in grade 3 goes down 3.8%. In post-pandemic, that's almost 4,000 students. This is page 3. And
Slides on page 3.
I'm sorry, top slide.
Okay, there you go.
So when you think about that as it relates to math, and then it's over 4,000 students for ELA, but then you ask further questions like how many students actually took M-STEP in 19 versus how many took it in 23, we're probably not capturing the total number of students' proficiency altogether. So it's likely even higher than 4,000 students in the state of Michigan that are not proficient or higher in relationship to pandemic policy. This is why we come to the board table. We don't adopt policies that suit our personal familial stories or what's going on in our lives at the time. We adopt policies that impact all of Michigan's students. And we adopt policies that make sense, that are evidence-based, and that won't hurt or harm academic progress and growth for students. So I would move right now to reconsider the vote of keeping kids safe and stable resolution.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Other questions from board members or comments from board members?
Yes. Looking at the data, with the African American population is very concerning, and it really just highlights the achievement gap even further. We talk a lot about reading, but the math is particularly concerning as well. I think that we should focus on math just as much as we focus on reading. And I got a call from a professor a couple of months ago saying, and this perfectly aligns with what he was talking about. He has students that come in from urban areas to the state university that he teaches at that are not prepared in math to take the business classes. So what are we doing to support, and what can we do to better support to make sure that we are helping our districts in closing the achievement gap?
Dr. Chapman, would you like to speak to that, particularly with reference to the fiscal year 24 budget?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Rice. And Ms. Tilly, that's a great question. So we're fortunate through legislation to be supported with funding. Very specifically, the My Kids Back on Track, where we will be providing intentional and what we refer to as high doses, high quality tutoring. Additionally, through the fiscal year 24 budget, we are afforded through 23H. We will have math consultants that will become an ongoing part of MDE, working directly with our leaders in the Office of Educational Supports, and will be offering supports as it relates to interventions, materials, and access to activities that will be data-driven so that we can capture where those deficiencies are with our students and develop programming that will substantially increase their engagement. And through that engagement, we're looking for them to have higher academic achievement in mathematics. So we do have efforts on the way and in the works specific to mathematics, which also complements what we're already doing in literacy.
Is that programming, are you looking to do that programming after school, during school? Do you have any idea, because I know you're still developing it, but any idea how that may look?
Again, very good question. That will be at the discretion of our LEAs. Some will have it embedded in the school day. Many will offer it before and or after school. So there's a combination based on flexibility, because we also want our students still to be able to have access to extracurricular activities, to athletics. So it depends on what's going to be a best fit for both the school community and the individual student.
My next question is, has there been a comparative analysis completed with how the rest of the nation is faring? How are we looking with, because I know that, and I'm sure that we're not the only state that had issues and complications due to the pandemic, and a decline in certain areas. So has there been an analysis done, and how is that looking?
So we have gotten the early returns for states, and we are amassing additional results from other states. We are finding that we are very much of a piece with many other states. In other words, a decline, and we're clawing our way back in certain regards. But although those results are not in, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, Michigan releases the public results probably the middle of the pack in terms of when states do that. So Dr. Rice is correct. We've tried to gather the states that have released their test scores from 2023, and we are looking very similar to some of our counterparts around the nation where we did see those dips, and we're seeing gains in mathematics across most grade levels, and then some ups and downs in ELA, again with students that were in the third grade last year seeing that drop. And we're not the only state that has seen that, where, like we discussed, potentially those students that were in their earliest years, the reading window, like we say, during the pandemic years. And we will continue to gather things as we go. Different states have different timelines, and there will be some more coming out in the next couple of weeks, I imagine.
Will we receive a thank you. Will we receive a presentation on that?
We're happy to share some information in writing with you initially, and then if you'd like a presentation, that would be fine. You bet. Thank you. You bet.
Thank you.
Ms. Lipton, and then Dr. Pugh.
Thank you for the presentation, and thank you for the new analysis regarding remote versus not remote. I think that that's really important given where we've been vis-a-vis the pandemic. My question is really related to the proficiency standard, and it may just be my own sort of inability to sort of wrap my heads around, but my understanding is that proficiency is a bit of a moving target, in the sense that when it's oftentimes reported, the public will use proficiency as sort of maybe what the common dictionary definition of proficiency might be. And yet in the education space, proficiency might be somewhat of a higher standard in terms of, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but perhaps what we might assume is like an A or B sort of grade level, and that it's further complicated when you start trying to report comparisons between states, because doesn't each state have the ability to determine a cut score that defines? Okay, maybe you could help me, because I think oftentimes I do appreciate hearing the information, but I just want to make sure that to the extent that the public is digesting information, or even the media is reporting information, that the full picture of what we're delivering is really understood. Because again, if we're not clear here, then how can we expect the public at large? So just could you give me some help on the full view of using that term proficient? Because I think it's a lot more nuanced and complicated than maybe many people will just throw it out when they start
Talk a little bit
running around
about
with their hair on fire.
cut scores and how we
Yep.
determine.
So, one, I appreciate the question. It's an
Yeah.
important reminder to me that I need to include a slide in the slide deck that lays out what the definition of proficient is, so we can start on the same level of what we're talking about. That would be an important thing to add. And you're right, proficiency in the educational assessment world may mean something different than proficient in another area. So what we do with our assessments is educators actually work to determine what does proficient mean. So each of our assessments have what we call 4 performance levels: not proficient, partially proficient, proficient, and then advanced. And then when we use the term proficient for presentations like this or for school accountability, the students that achieved a proficient or advanced are the ones that are included as proficient. Now, when we go through and how do we define these things, those definitions of what proficient or advanced means are created by educators as well. For an example, if we're talking about the 5th grade M-STEP exam, we pulled together a panel of Michigan educators that focus on elementary that are involved in 5th grade mathematics. They're in the classroom, that's what they teach every day, and they work through a process reviewing content standards and what they know about 5th grade students to determine what would a 5th grade student that is proficient look like. What would they do in terms of performance? How many content standards would you expect that they would master? So it is a process that's developed by educators to set these performance levels of what the student would look like performing in each of these 4 buckets. Then from there, we go through what's called a standard setting process, where the same educators actually go through and set cut scores of what score on the 5th grade M-STEP mathematics exam would you expect a proficient student to achieve. It's clear as mud. It's an exciting process. If anybody ever wants to observe, next time we do one, you guys are all welcome. But it is a unique process to the education world. It's done by grade level and content area, where educators are involved determining what does proficient mean for Michigan students. Because you're right,
Correct.
there is not a requirement that states around the country have a common set of proficiency standards or definitions of what proficient means. There's a lot of commonalities you'll see, but it's not a common thread across the nation. And we're happy, I can email the board some materials about that as well, if desired.
Thank you for that. That was sort of my impression, but it's always helpful to hear that. If I may, Mr. Chair. Just in terms of the overall data regarding growth, In your, expert opinion, given the fact that the pandemic vis-a-vis education created a once-in-a-lifetime, at least our collective lifetime, learning challenge, and there was not necessarily a playbook on which we could simply refer in terms of what to do, is it reasonable to expect that the on-ramp to returning to pre-pandemic, if you will, expected growth may take more than a year or two to achieve? I'm not asking you to deliver the future in terms of how long it would take, but is it at least reasonable to believe that the on-ramp could be several years, perhaps more than a year or two, to
Sure.
back to pre-pandemic?
For some children, depending upon where they were when they entered the pandemic and what happened to them during the pandemic, it is reasonable to assume that their recovery is going to be longer. Some people moved through the pandemic, they were not adversely affected. They weren't adversely affected pre-pandemic by a whole host of adverse experiences in childhood. They were leading relatively good lives in a whole host of different ways. They moved into the pandemic. They were relatively spared from the adverse impact of the pandemic. That is not true of all children. Right. And what we're highlighting particularly is if you entered the pandemic particularly challenged by poverty or by other circumstances, you entered the pandemic and were hammered by the pandemic particularly, either because of life events or because of decisions of your local school district to stay remote for a period of months or for the full year. And if you had challenges within your family, your own health, the health of your mom, your dad, someone died, someone had long COVID, someone was hospitalized, all of these adversely affected your situation. If you did that at 16, it was different than if you were 6.
Right.
If you were 16, you missed certain life events. It was not a good situation, and it may have been really a tragic situation if you lost a loved one. But if you were 6 and went through the exact same circumstances, you were in your reading window, and you were particularly adversely affected, all else being equal. All else being equal. So, to your initial questions, every state has its own tests. Every state has its own test scores for each subject, for each grade level. Some of those tests are high bar tests. The bar over which you have to hop to be considered proficient is high, and so they have low percentages of children considered at or above proficiency. Some of those tests are low bar tests, and so greater percentages of children are considered proficient. You may recall that when you were in the legislature that we had a low bar MEP, and we changed, while you were in the legislature, from a low bar MEP to a high bar MEP. Well, how did we do that? The tests stayed the same, but the cut scores rose. And when the cut scores rose, the percentage of children who were considered to be proficient on each assessment dropped. And you may recall that, for example, in mathematics, the percentage of children considered proficient on that low bar assessment, 2009, 10, to 2011, was over 90% statewide, and it plummeted to under 40%. Same test, same children, a recalculation of proficiency given a substantially inflated proficiency bar, and a deflation of percentages considered to be at or above proficient. So your point about the setting of the bar is important. And I think, particularly Ms. Jackson, but also Dr. Pepin and other educators know well that there's a lot that takes place underneath the bar. You can have tremendous improvement and indeed substantial basic knowledge of the discipline, whether it be math or language arts, and still not be considered proficient on this high bar assessment. I don't know, Ms. Jackson, would you like to speak to that at all or not?
No, I absolutely agree that below that cut score, there's room for a lot of growth. I know my students, they outperform where they were expected to perform in mathematics, but they're still well below that bar. So in my school, we were celebrating our achievement, but we know that there's a long way to go to get to that cut score, like quite a long way to go, but still all of the movement is incremental, and any movement is great, and we were very pleased with our growth coming back from the pandemic and, with our most normal year that we've had post-pandemic. So I definitely agree.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone, did we do justice to your questions?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Dr. Pugh.
Dr. Rice, you pointed out some of the thoughts that I was having. I guess the term recover is perplexing to me for some of the reasons that you bring up, Dr. Rice. The others, as far as how children were impacted by COVID. The other is around the educators. Do we have any data that shows that we could line up with these schools in person, virtual, as far as how educators returned to the classroom, whether we're talking about, there have been educators who are concerned because people, they were out of there when we had people who were not concerned about ensuring safe learning environments for them and their children. And then we also know that when we look at the crowding of classrooms, and then the building infrastructure, that all of those things that impacted educators. I'm just wondering, when we talk about recovery, number one, thinking about the children, but also thinking and what they went through during that period, but also educators. Do they still have the same environment as it relates to the educators that came back to the profession?
So educators, I'm going to take a stab at that, and then I'll throw it over to you. We had a teacher shortage going into the pandemic. The pandemic exacerbated that shortage. What do we know about student achievement? What drives student achievement most? Well, what drives student achievement most is a strong, experienced, well-trained teacher, more than anything else. And when you have a teacher shortage, that adversely affects student achievement. And when teachers are sick, and are unable to come in or are in and out because of sickness, that adversely affects student achievement as well. So the pandemic exacerbated something that was already there and was particularly acute, as you know, in poorer communities across the state. I would say the shortage exacerbated was the biggest adverse impact relative to staff effect on student achievement. Do you have any more to share on that?
That's exactly what I was thinking, Dr. Rice, that COVID, it exacerbated where we already were, and it just made it greater. And so to your ask, Dr. Pugh, yes, educators were affected just like students. So in that time frame, in that space, LEAs had to make the best fit conscious decision to make sure we still had educators in the classroom that would be able to carry on, if you will, the daily operations of that setting. In terms of data, we rely very heavily on what we call our rep report, and that lets us know which classrooms where children had access to what we would say credential staff and or staff that were placed in classrooms on a temporary basis because that regular staff member could have been out for his or her own personal illness or that of his or her family.
You're next, but let's do justice to Dr. Pugh's questions before we pivot. Go ahead.
Right. So, I mean, those of us, we knew that in-person learning and having children in that setting with their educators, with their peers was the best setting. And that's why many of us definitely pushed the non-pharmaceutical mitigation strategies. I get concerned when we put up words like remote versus in person because that's so loaded. I mean, this conversation that we're having right now is so loaded, and someone might think that we're talking about remote versus in person, and we know that that is a lot of what we're talking about, but it's also packed with so many other nuances that we're talking about right now. As well.
It is because those districts that were remote for the entirety of 2021 school year, which is how we've defined remote for the sake of those two slides, those districts educated far poorer children to begin with. They were adversely impacted pre-pandemic, and then we argue more substantially adversely impacted by the pandemic. So there's a lot, there's no question but that there's a lot going on the slide. What we wanted to indicate was that different children were affected by the pandemic differently.
Right.
And some largely read about the pandemic, and that was the extent of their adverse impact. Many others buried people. They buried parents. They buried grandparents. They buried other. They buried other family members, and so it was much more dramatic for them and traumatic for them.
40% of children who were orphaned here in Michigan were Black children, and then there was a very high percentage in comparison to the percentage of the population for Hispanic children as well. So to add to all that, I appreciate the data that's given, and it gives us the opportunity to have this conversation, but it also gives people who want to spread misinformation the opportunity to do that. The other, speaking of misinformation, I didn't know that Michigan was at the top when it came to educator shortage. I thought I read something that was
right. So how
I heard that this morning. That's why I'm asking.
No, I know why you're asking it. So a few things. Our teacher shortage was particularly acute going into the pandemic. Our recovery from the teacher shortage has been substantial in one way, but not necessarily in another. In terms of those preparing for the profession, we're up 56% in the number of people preparing for the profession in the last 5 years. But that's different from what is in our classrooms. So I'm preparing for the profession. I'm 19 years old. I'm not a teacher at this point. So the pipeline is improving. We can see it in our ed prep provider numbers. But that's different from whether or not they're out on the other end in classrooms. We continue to have a shortage. It continues to affect the education that we're able to provide across the state for our young people. Mr. Bullock and then Ms. Snyder.
Actually, remember Tilly had her hand up actually before I did, but most of the thoughts that I had have actually been addressed through, like the numbers for me. My thoughts are like all of the variables. We addressed the shortage pre-pandemic, the proficiency rates pandemic, but as we talk about these things, the entire country numbers dipped, not just Michigan. It's not like we're the only state on the island having this issue. 45 states, numbers went down to math, another set of from 4th to 8th grade. So if anybody failed the policy, it was the person sitting at the helm. But the other things that are variables were the resources. So we don't have enough teachers returning, then students need resources, those folks aren't there, whether it's counseling, whether it's some, behavioral health issue. So all of these things are playing into whether our numbers go up or down. And because you don't have enough teachers, then we got to overcrowd. You've already addressed that. So then if we are remote, everybody in Detroit don't have broadband. So that's a struggle in itself. So we don't have, going remote sounds great to a person that has the resource. But I'm not getting it today if I don't have Wi-Fi in my house. So there are so many variables to these numbers that
There's a lot of complexity.
I would like to see, let's see what this looks like 5 years from now, how we recover. We can't talk about the recovery during the recovery.
Thank you very much. Ms. Snyder, Ms. Tilley.
Yes, if anybody got policy wrong, they are sitting at the helm, absolutely. And that's something that I tried to talk about this morning. No, the pandemic policy that failed kids nationwide and statewide. Excuse me. I would like the opportunity to speak.
Sure.
Just because other states got it wrong too doesn't mean it's not a problem. And yes, there is, and that's the problem that we have tried to define over and over and over again. And when we talk about misinformation, absolutely part of that is correcting the record. When I hear our board president say that we supported in-person learning because we knew that was correct, Tom and I brought a resolution before the board during the pandemic, which was part of a non-economically disadvantaged district that happened to be the most remote in the state for the longest period of time. Ann Arbor Public Schools came to the table with almost 400 medical professionals, leaders in the community, education professionals, and said, please, let us go back to school. They begged for it. And we attached it to a resolution and said, this has got to stop. And people at this board table voted no on it. So again, when we consider the foundation of what policy looks like to move forward to improve these numbers, you have to set that foundation on the truth. And you can't just come to the board table and say, oh, this is misinformation because it behooves you now, and then pretend like you didn't do what you did when you did it. And the numbers now reflect what you did when you did it. We're not going to sit here and pretend that you didn't do what you did when you did it, and that you weren't warned that this would cause harm on students. And that does inform us as we move forward with policy.
So what district are you referring to, which was remote the longest?
I'd be happy to actually pull up the resolution and the letter that Ann Arbor Public Schools wrote this board and you as our state superintendent during that time. And they said, please open our school doors. So when I hear today, oh, we supported in-person learning and not remote learning, when we're reflecting on the numbers that are a direct representation of the policy that we led this state with. I'm sorry, I didn't. Tom didn't. But you did. And the board members that voted no on those types of resolutions in that time did. You will not sit here and say you did not do that when we're talking about thousands of students across the state that are suffering.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Tilley.
I want to thank you earlier for acknowledging that there was a real issue, because for so long, people were saying there was not a real issue with this pandemic. And acknowledging that virus had been around, as somebody in the healthcare profession, that this virus had been around a long time. And I want to acknowledge and thank Dr. Rice, thank MDE, and so many in this state that fought to keep our kids safe. This was the first time that we had dealt with anything like this in our lifetime, and really the whole world. As far as we know historically, there has never been a pandemic across the world. And so, so many people lost their lives. We had children losing their lives. And we did everything that we could to try to keep them safe. And there is no reason that we should be getting a tongue lashing because of that. Um, Furthermore, I want to go back into what's at hand. And so, students with disabilities, their percentages are very low. They have been consistently low for ELA and math. I know that we have a historical budget. There's still more work that needs to be done, but right now we have more opportunities to use those resources. And I know from working in the schools prior that there has been an issue with staffing parapros in classes. So I wanted to know, as a result of the increased funding, how does that affect the parapros? Like, are there more parapros? I know there's a teacher shortage. I know there's a shortage with support staff, but has that increase affected the pay that will they get a pay increase as far as parapros? Are there more being staffed as a result of the increased funding and increased budget? And just overall, what are we doing to make sure there are increases in that area so that we can staff those classrooms? Because there have been grave shortages in that area as well. Thank you.
So you don't make up for underfunding at the state level in a year or two. The fiscal year 23 budget, the fiscal year 24 budgets are terrific budgets. They're historic budgets in many ways. But they will not, in and of themselves, address by themselves and immediately address the teacher shortage and the support staff shortage. Those continue. We are going to need a period of years of improved budgets, number one, to boost salaries, not simply for teachers, but for all of our educational staff members, number one, to improve the pipeline, number two, to improve the sense of efficacy in the classroom. If you teach a large number of children, you're not going to feel, all else being equal, you may be a brilliant teacher, but all else being equal, you're not going to feel the same efficacy as if you are teaching a smaller number of young people. Easier to get your arms around, easier to move upward in terms of student achievement. So we have to address a number of things to address not only the teacher shortage, but the support staff shortage. We have to address pay. We have to address benefits. We have to address support, not simply for students, but for staff as well. Push up that sense of efficacy and also push up this issue of teacher voice, teacher involvement in their workplace and in the decisions that get made in each local school district. There are 840 local school districts in the state, gentle people. It's a local control state. And we have 56 ISDs in addition to that. There are almost 900 school districts between the LEAs and the ISDs in the state. There are more school districts than there are employees in the Michigan Department of Education. And so the challenge when we increase funding at the state level is to have it impact the local level. And when there aren't teachers to buy, when there aren't support staff to buy, when your support staff have gone to Chick-fil-A or McDonald's or Burger King to work to get a raise, there are issues. We adversely affected public education profoundly in this state for a period of years, and it's going to take time to bring it back. So that's the answer. We have, so to your question, specific to parapros, we continue to have challenges, not simply with teachers and other support staff, but with parapros as well.
Yes, and I know that there's challenges, and that's why I also asked about, what are we doing to increase that as well? I know we are doing some things, but I know there's a huge focus as well on the teacher shortage. this is an area that's dire as well. Because I have been in many classrooms that needed parapros, and there were schools, the entire school may share a parapro when it's supposed to be in every single class that needs, that has a child with disabilities, and that does not happen.
Pay is the biggest issue when it comes to support staff. Absolutely the biggest issue. If I leave a position in a local school district for $1 an hour raise, you know I'm not making a lot of money. You know I need that $1 an hour raise, that $40 a week raise. You know that's real for me. And we've got to do better. If we can't compete successfully with McDonald's and Burger King and Chick-fil-A, that has really existential ramifications for us.
Absolutely. For support staff as well as ECE staff. Has there been data that has come in yet this school year about the parapros? How many, have we lost parapros? Have they increased at all? Or
No,
do
we do not
measure that?
We do not. So we have rep reports twice a year that measure relative staffing levels by category. But we do not have a rep report for the beginning of the year per se. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Thank you. Other questions? Mr. McMillan?
I know time is getting late. I just wanted to make sure, because I don't know if these two slides and this idea of remote versus in-person is going to take off and become a launching pad for arguments pro or con, in policy debates. But the in-person, 2021, there was a lot, there wasn't many that was in-person for all 9 months, was there? I mean, 10%, 5%, I mean, I don't know that.
Okay.
I mean,
so this is to the challenge of definitions. The term remote in these two slides is reserved for those districts.
Totally, 100%.
That's correct.
9 months, yeah.
If you were anything other than that.
Right, so 8 months, you're called in person.
That's correct. So if I could, the issue is, no, this is an important question here.
Yeah.
So essentially, what we've done, given the data available to us, what we've done is we've represented this as a toggle switch, okay, as a light switch, if you will. But really, this is really a dimmer switch. It's really a dosage issue. What percentage of time were you in person? What percentage of time were you remote? There are a number of districts in the state, DPSCD for example, which was remote for most of the 2021 school year, but not the entirety. The same is true for Ann Arbor. Most of 2021, not the entirety. And given the limitations of the data and the analysis that we did, in fairness, they end up being lumped into the in-person. It's an imperfect analysis, without a doubt, but it makes the point generally that to be remote maximally had an adverse impact on young people, particularly in their reading window.
Okay, I mean, I guess it gets to Mitchell's question about statistically relevant. I mean, can you just give me a number? How many were remote? 5% of the kids in the state, 10%, 20%?
Well, the issue
these two slides.
If I could, the challenge with that is that this is not a kid analysis per se, it's a district analysis. What I mean,
but I just want to know, just give me a number. How many does this represent for kids? 10% of the kids?
There are 47 districts involved. We can get you the number.
That's about 10% of the districts.
I think they're smaller on average.
Smaller districts?
I think they're smaller on average.
All right, I know it's late.
More PSAs than non-PSAs.
Oh, okay.
And so they tend to be
quite a bit
smaller.
smaller. Okay,
yes.
so maybe 5% of the kids. So I appreciate wanting to dissect it. I just want to make sure that if policy decisions are going to be drawn on this, that it's clear that if this is really small, the in-person could have been 8 months. The 1 month they were in person, they had these barricades. The kids walked around. I mean, I wouldn't even call it in person. I would call it
Understood.
maybe it was even worse than being remote. I don't even know in some cases. So I just wanted to make sure the relevancy of this. I would be remiss, and I don't want to talk a lot about this, but we do know that there was some discussion about when this information, and the word release is in here, so results in release. So I feel like we should at least say, I am concerned about what the media was saying, that this information, and quite a bit of information in the past 4 or 5 or 6 years, I don't know if it's since our new superintendent or since Marty came on board, but it seems like there's an effort to suppress information from the media, to use it for power, control, to dribble it out, whatever the reasons are. I am concerned about it. If in old days they used to embargo this information and tell them, the media how, not to. I understand there's issues with containing it once you get it out to the superintendents. Could it go to local board members? Could media, surprise or gotcha to some people? I don't, there are issues, but I still would hope that we can really wrestle with information so that when the media gets this and then when they report it to the public post-embargo, that it's relevant and, that they can report on it well and do their what media is left to do research and real reporting. We do have some of those outlets, 2 of them here and others. Let's help them make sure that they can do their job well. So I'm concerned about that and how things are being manipulated or suppressed, really. And then that just finally gets to my last point is that, authoritarians and tyrants love the idea of misinformation and censorship. That's how they label things misinformation if they don't like it, if it makes it so it harms their power. And this is just, from 1984 and memory hole to everything else. This is just clear. And I was just listening to Glenn Greenwald, a socialist, who's an incredible podcaster and reporter. But the amount of things were labeled misinformation that are now shown to be true is astounding. But it was used for censorship and used to control and to assault the First Amendment. Thankfully, the courts are catching up on that and really showing that the Biden administration and others were certainly using the FBI and the Surgeon General and others, and directly from the White House, to censor and to label things misinformation that wasn't, just because they didn't like the information. And so I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that this is a term that is used and favored by those who are authoritarians and tyrants and those who don't like information to get out that they disagree with.
Does fake news fall in there?
Are you speaking right now, or have you been acknowledged by the chair?
Yeah, really doing that.
Yeah, you need to be acknowledged by the chair to speak.
Let's, Mr. McMillan, are you finished?
I'm done.
Very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate you referring to me as the new superintendent. I sometimes feel so much older and appreciate being referred to as new. Presenters, I'm sorry, Dr. Pritchett.
I promise to be quick. First of all, thank you very much. Andy and I have been talking back and forth about M-STEP results probably for longer than either of us want to admit at this point. For the teachers in the room, the educators in the room, I just want to put in perspective that this is one measurement. It's an important measurement. There's no question about it. I'm not negating it. I'm not saying we shouldn't look at it, but it is one measurement. The teachers in our classrooms in Michigan right now are assessing as we speak to determine where their students have challenges, where their students are excelling, and trying to differentiate that instruction as best they can with our challenges across the board with staffing. So I appreciate the information. I appreciate Dr. Robinson's question about statistically significant. I have a colleague who has since retired who used to warn me all the time about being careful with the word statistically significant. Maybe that's why I can't say it.
It's always hard to say.
Yeah, it is hard to say, isn't it? But it is an important thing to look at when we're looking at these numbers. We knew we were facing challenges when we when we went through the pandemic. We knew that our children were facing challenges in the learning environment. Our staff was facing challenges. And some of these numbers appear as though we're starting to show some improvement, not where we need to be. But again, it's one assessment, 1 point in a student's life during a 1,098-hour school year. So I just want to keep that in perspective as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Pritchett. And just to summarize, 15 of the 20 categories, rising test results, 4 lower test results, 1 flat. Presenters, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next presentation will feature an update on Michigan Top 10 Strategic Education Plan Goal Number 2 to improve literacy achievement. We welcome our presenters, Dr. Delsa Chapman, backed by popular demand, Deputy Superintendent for the Division of Educator, Student, and School Supports, Dr. Corinne Edwards, Director of Office of Educational Supports, and Ms. Jennifer Saylor, the Assistant Director of the Office of Educational Supports. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. We may, however, give you an assessment at the end of the presentation. Presenters, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. And again, good morning, Board. Our presentation today will focus on the efforts and outcomes to address Goal 2 of Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan, Improve Early Literacy Achievement. With intentionality, those joining me today, Dr. Corinne Edwards, Director of the Office of Educational Supports, along with Assistant Director Jennifer Saylor, will focus on the how and why of literacy. And without further ado, Dr. Edwards.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman. And good morning, everyone. The Michigan Top 10 Strategic Education Plan outlines 8 goals that, when implemented successfully, will support learning and impact life outcomes for learners across our great state. Goal number 2, improving early literacy achievement, is a key goal in helping us realize our vision for all Michigan learners, that they will have inspiring, engaging learning environments that foster creative and critical thinkers. Over the past year, the Office of Educational Support's Literacy Unit has intentionally focused its work efforts on Goal 2 by providing technical assistance and professional growth opportunities for Michigan educators, both teachers and leaders, to increase, enhance, and support their readiness and their ability to develop and maintain academic learning spaces and activities that focus on addressing the comprehensive literacy learning needs of our youngest students, and that also reflect a valuing of the diverse and rich cultures our students represent. Our goal today is to provide the board with an update on our current statewide efforts to support and move forward SEP goal number 2. Building on the foundational efforts and continuing initiatives implemented over the past years, we have aligned and focused our efforts to improve early literacy achievement through the lens of both the how and the why of literacy learning and teaching throughout the state. This both and approach to literacy instruction speaks to 2 equally important pillars necessary in supporting and moving forward the literacy skills achievement of our students, while also fostering a love of reading which drives success in learning. As we consider Michigan's Top 10 SEP, the how speaks to those researched and evidence-based approaches to literacy instruction that serve as the building blocks to helping our students learn to read. The why speaks to those literacy learning experiences that will encourage and instill in our students a joy and interest in reading that will encourage each to express creativity, have a voice in their own learning, and feel connected to their learning experience as they progress through grades 4 through 12, reading to learn. Our updates today will outline those MDE literacy initiatives framed within the how, the Letters Training Grant, the Dyslexia Guidance Document, Literacy Essentials, and other how educator resources and related professional development. We'll also discuss the initiatives framed within the why, equity and literacy guidance documents, diversity and literature resources, our My CLSD plan and grant, family engagement, the literacy symposium, and other additional related information. I'll now turn it over to Mrs. Jennifer Saylor, Assistant Director in the Office of Educational Supports, to walk us through these updates. Jen?
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and thank you, Dr. Chapman. Good morning, members of the board, Dr. Rice. As the MDE moves forward to impact and improve literacy achievement for our students, the department and the literacy unit is collaborating with a wide range of education partners, building department efforts on the how, with an intentional focus on ensuring the providing of high-quality literacy instruction for all Michigan learners. This includes providing Michigan educators, teachers, and leaders with the requisite supports, training, and resources needed to plan for and implement with fidelity literacy learning instruction rooted in the science of reading. Over the course of the past 2 years, fiscal years 22-22 and 22-23, Section 35A10 allocated a combined $14 million to provide training in partnership with Lexia Learning on the language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling, or letters. This year, an additional $10 million was added for a combined total of $24 million to support literacy teaching and learning over 3 years. Developed by Dr. Louisa Motes and leaders in the field of literacy, Letters teaches the skills needed to support effective word recognition and language comprehension, teaching and learning. With its increased funding, Letters can continue to provide Michigan educators with high-quality, research-based professional learning to support literacy across the state. Currently, 6,000 educators have registered to participate in 5 cohorts, with a 6th cohort scheduled to start in February of 2024. Additionally, cohort learning will expand in the coming year to include Letters for administrators and an accelerated Letters course. In previous presentations, we have shared the Scarborough's reading rope model, and will build upon that information to draw connections to the content in volumes 1 and 2 of Letters courses. Through each volume of Letters, participants access reading research based on neuroscience, cognitive development psychology, and linguistics, so that educators have solid evidence on how to teach reading to benefit all students. Because skilled reading is complex, multiple research studies in these areas inform Letters, including the model of Scarborough's rope shown here. Reading the model from bottom to top, Scarborough's reading rope is made up of lower and upper strands. The bottom, or blue, word recognition portion of the model identifies the skills and knowledge necessary to learn to read, and includes phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition of familiar words. These components are aligned to content found in Letters Volume 1. The upper, or orange, language comprehension portion of Scarborough's rope shows the concepts necessary when we read to learn. These concepts include background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, and literacy knowledge. When these braid together, the result is a skilled and accurate, fluent reader with strong comprehension. When teachers understand these skills, they are better able to adjust instruction and provide support for all of their students. Keeping the information we just discussed in the last slide in mind, we'll now take a closer look at how Letters correlates with Scarborough's reading rope. Volume 1 covers the research and foundations of how we learn to read through word recognition skills, such as phonological awareness skills, how to teach, how to assess them, code emphasis, phonics instruction, teaching spelling through dictation, word study, phoneme graphing mapping, syllable types, and how to use them in instruction, spelling screeners, building reading fluency, and the relationship between fluency and comprehension. Volume 2 covers the language comprehension strand of the rope, where readers transition from learning to read to reading to learn. This includes such concepts as vocabulary instruction, creating a mental map, comprehension instruction, syntax, and text structure. It also teaches the foundational and language skills necessary for writing, letter formation and handwriting fluency, sentence building, and assessing students' progress in writing. Both volumes provide comprehensive coverage of the types of reading and writing difficulties children experience, how to assess these difficulties, and using assessment data to plan differentiated instruction and intervention. This slide is a representation of the units taught in Letters Professional Learning for Educators course, which is where we have the highest number of enrollees. The continued funding provided through 35A10 allows us to expand our offerings beyond classroom teachers to administrators and institutes of higher education. Throughout the past few years, beginning with Cohort 1, enrollment in Letters has continued to grow across the state, with the largest cohort enrolled in Cohort 5. In addition, the administrator and IHE offerings, educators will also have the option to join an accelerated cohort, where they will access the same breadth and depth of content, but in a condensed time frame. It should be noted that Letters training is extensive and provides participants with a breadth and depth of comprehensive literacy learning. This is an enormous time commitment, taking 18 to 24 months on average to complete. In the spirit of lifelong learning, we appreciate our educators who have committed to continued learning about the science of reading. This chart demonstrates increased learning for educators who have completed Volume 1 in both Letters K-3 and early childhood or EC content. Letters considers mastery of content at 80%. On the left, participants who completed Letters Volume 1 of the K-3 content showed an increase of 25%. At the same time, educators who completed Volume 1 of the EC content on the right showed an increase of 28.75%. Because we know the teaching of reading is complex, as seen in the Scarborough's Reading Rote model earlier, an increase in teacher knowledge at this rate is notable. Ultimately, the value is not on post-test scores, but how this new learning is impacting our students. Notice the positive reflections that tell a story of educators finding value in staying in the profession as they learn more about the science of reading. Teachers feel like they have a new lease on their careers and want to stay in the profession longer. They report unlearning some methods based on new research and feel they have hands-on opportunities to practice what students need to learn. Over the past several years, the Michigan Department of Education, in collaboration with the Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators, General Education Leadership Network, and the Early Literacy Task Force, have collectively provided multiple opportunities to support and improve literacy teaching and learning. Through these combined efforts, two complementary pathways for valuable professional learning have emerged. The essential instructional practice in early literacy are the research-based practices that teachers employ in the classroom. Letters translates current research into practical guidance that can be applied to existing curricula. Together, this collaborative effort is intended to provide educators with a deeper and more comprehensive literacy learning experience to teach Michigan students. In June of 2023, Dr. Rice and MAISA Executive Director Dr. John Severson shared a collaborative memo and companion brief emphasizing a call to action and highlighting the relationship between EIP and Letters. The intention was to clarify how the two professional learning opportunities provide educators with a deeper and more comprehensive literacy learning experience to teach Michigan students. As part of this urgent call to action, Pre-K-6 administrators, early literacy coaches, Pre-K-6 educators, and Pre-K-12 special education educators are asked to enroll and complete Letters professional learning by 2026, with an optional accelerated one-year cohort opportunity available with priority given to literacy coaches, support the essential instructional practices in early literacy with long-term professional learning. These research-informed practices are the framework for high-quality instruction and should be evident with every child in every classroom every day. And support literacy coaching with specialized literacy knowledge informed by the EIPs and Letters to work as a literacy leader using job-embedded coaching cycles based on the MDE coaching model. To support educators in their efforts even further, the essentials were updated in July of 2023 and can be found at literacyessentials.org. Building on the alignment of letters to the Literacy Essentials, now is a great time to realign and adjust our focus to the research-supported literacy coaching model and practices. With administrator support and multi-year initiatives, literacy coaches provide powerful, job-embedded, ongoing professional development with the primary goal of enhancing classroom literacy instruction through improving teacher expertise. Effective literacy coaching models include side-by-side support directly with teachers through conferencing, modeling, applying assessment literacy, observing, and co-planning. As a result, instructional capacity and sustainability within schools increase. In addition, through improving teacher expertise and the quality of core instruction, student achievement increases. This model provides a visual for coaches to spend 75% of their time working directly with teachers, literacy coaches, and literacy leaders. Coaches may spend, 25% of their time working as a literacy leader. This model serves as a map to lead to a destination, improving early literacy achievement. To support these efforts, Section 35A4 of the State School Aid Act provides $42 million for early literacy coaches at ISDs to assist teachers in developing and implementing instructional strategies for students in grades K to 3, so students are reading at grade level by the end of grade 3. All literacy coaches funded through 35A4 must have already received or be making progress toward receiving professional learning in letters. And now on to dyslexia guidance. In August of 2022, the MDE released a new resource guide to help Michigan educators improve the literacy skills of children and build more successful learners. The handbook is gaining traction across the state as the go-to guide for pre-K-12 educators. Designed to help educators develop a shared understanding of best practices to prevent reading difficulties associated with the primary consequences of dyslexia, which is a reading disorder primarily characterized by word-level reading difficulties originating from phonological processing weakness. The Michigan Dyslexia Handbook also provides practices needed to inform instruction and intervention methods for learners with dyslexia characteristics. Since its publication, the growing awareness of and interest in the Michigan Dyslexia Handbook has promoted presentations throughout the state. To support educators in understanding best practices in accelerating learner outcomes in literacy, the Literacy Unit has partnered with the MyMTSS TA Center to provide professional learning opportunities to a variety of educational organizations, with interest continuing to grow. And concluding our focus on the how of literacy, we would like to provide a brief mention and reflection upon the repeal of the retention component of the Read by Grade 3 legislation. The parents of last year's third graders were the last to receive letters about the RBG3 retention. While this component remained in effect for the 2023 spring MSTEP testing window, its repeal signifies a response to research that retention is not an effective strategy to support literacy learning. All other components of the law will continue to be implemented, which will allow educators to continue to focus on how we teach reading, as well as those factors that support our students to become skillful, thriving, and joyful readers. Building on the how of literacy, in her book, Unearthing Joy, Dr. Goldie Muhammad reminds us, helping students to uplift beauty, aesthetics, truth, ease, wonder, wellness, solutions to the problems of the world, and personal fulfillment, joy is the ultimate goal of teaching and learning. This is MDE's why of literacy. Our why speaks to the humanity and the recognition of placing the lived experiences of all Michigan students at the center of literacy learning, and will be the focus of the next segment of our presentation. In alignment with how we teach reading, as discussed in the first part of our presentation today, and to quote the MDE Equity and Literacy Guidance document published in August of 2021, we continue to believe that we have a responsibility to dramatically improve our teaching and encouragement of literacy, of reading and writing in our children. The importance of honoring the lived experience of our students, families, and educators is why we believe strongly in the power of inclusion and use of diverse literacy resources. We will now share some highlights of our equity and literacy initiatives intended to ensure all students are engaged, skilled readers. In addition to reinforcing the importance of literacy, the Equity and Literacy Guidance document provides foundational guidance that includes practices for creating engaging learning environments, the daily involvement of students in literacy, the scientific or technical aspects of literacy instruction, the role of family engagement, and resources to support equity, each of which are included throughout today's presentation. Building off this initial guidance, and because we believe in Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop's assertion that student literacy engagement increases as students see themselves through mirrors and others through windows portrayed accurately in their reading. A highlight of the why of our literacy work was the celebration of Black authors through weekly calendars this past February. By raising the consciousness about great Black authors and lifting up their voices, we seek to create conditions for greater engagement with literature among Michigan students. In celebration of Black History Month, the Michigan Department of Education and the Library of Michigan showcase Black authors and their literary works during each week with the weekday recommendations. Excuse me. I'm gonna plow through it. With the weekday recommendations selected for nominations submitted by Michigan Teachers of the Year, Michigan Regional Teachers of the Year, and MDE educators, and are intended for use by educators. Thank you. Additionally, each weekend featured a video recommendation from the true stars of the weekly calendars, our Michigan students. In their videos, Laisaya, Thomas, Faith, Hiba, and Kyla each shared one of their favorite books with an explanation of how the book speaks to each of them individually. To view the videos and explore the calendars, please visit the MDE Equity and Literacy website. Pause for just a second. Thank you.
Take over. I can.
You want to?
Sure.
All right.
That's no problem. As Dr. Rice reminds us, words do matter, voices too. There's value and power in teaching diverse literature, and we must open that power to all of our children so they can navigate the world in which they will live. To do any less is a disservice to our children who need to learn broadly about the literature and history of their country and their world. To bring these important ideas into classrooms throughout Michigan, we developed guidance in a new resource this past year. Did you pass it on?
All right.
Diverse classroom libraries, windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors to lifelong literacy and learning. I'm good, Dr. Rice. Thank you.
I get paid to distribute
You
that.
just, hey. Created in collaboration with literacy experts, the Indigenous Education Initiative, Region 8 Comprehensive Center, and members of the MDE staff, this guidance provides tools, resources, and best practices to support why diverse classroom libraries are important, what should be included in diverse classroom libraries, and how educators can engage students in lifelong literacy learning through diverse classrooms. Good?
We'll see. Relationships are the cornerstone of family engagement. For this reason, MDE has partnered with Region 8 of the Comprehensive Center Network to create resources that support educators in building family partnerships to enhance students' literacy development at school and at home. The MDE's goal in this initiative is to assist with building their respective toolkits as they work in building families' capacity to engage in literacy-based activities at home. By providing practical ideas and resources for families, schools are better able to bridge literacy instruction from classrooms into homes, giving children more literacy opportunities in multiple contexts. The briefs have an administrative set of 3, an educator set of 3, and an at-home practice set of 3. There is a messaging bundle for districts ID and ISDs to use to highlight the resources. There is also both a facilitator and participant playbook for professional learning sessions for districts and ISDs to put into use. The QR code on this slide links to the Michigan Family Engagement for Literacy webpage, which includes the graphic illustrated here as well as the resources I just mentioned. When families and schools partner to support children's literacy achievement, children have more opportunities to learn and practice essential literacy skills and grow as readers and writers. To deepen and more directly support the work of our Y, Michigan students, families, and educators, the Michigan Department of Education received a 5-year, $16 million award for the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant from the U.S. Department of Education in 2021. Specifically focused on geographically diverse LEAs located in qualified opportunity zones throughout the state, the MyCLSD grant is aligned with the goal to improve early literacy achievement in the state's top 10 strategic education plan and supports families and communities as essential partners of teachers, support staff, and administrators in the education of students. Included in this award are specific strategies and activities to build literacy communities for children in local communities across the state, which will change academic and life trajectories for our students. Michigan's three main strategies for the MyCLSD grant initiative are: Strategy 1, to continue and strengthen collaboration with partner organizations; Strategy 2, to engage in continuous internal needs assessment and prioritization; and Strategy 3, to monitor and support LEAs, progress and expenditures, and build community among LEAs. To operationalize Strategy 1, MDE's grant application named 4 partner organizations. Partnering with these organizations affords the LEAs an increased likelihood of achieving their own goals and the goals and objectives of MDE to improve literacy proficiency for all students by incorporating evidence-based practices and increasing family engagement. Our 4 identified partner organizations are the Michigan Association of Intermediate School Administrators, General Education Leadership Network, an Early Literacy Task Force, Too Small to Fail, Talking is Teaching, Pre-K Reading Corps and K-3 Reading Corps, Michigan Education Corps, and the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, MyMTSS TA Center. Through collaboration with MyCLSD districts, we participate in activities that align with Strategy 2 and provide resources that support each district in developing a team approach, considering long-term strategies, investing in professional development, engaging with multiple levels of leadership, and monitoring data. Work efforts aligned with Strategy 3 are best represented by our work directly with MyCLSD sub-grantees, which I'll share more about on the next slide. MyCLSD districts are Benton Harbor, Detroit Public School Community District, Flint Community Schools, Muskegon Heights Public School Academy System, and Pontiac School District. In addition to ongoing collaboration, each district provides summaries of their strategies and implementation of grant initiatives through qualitative semi-structured interviews with representatives from partner organizations and facilitators from each of the 5 sub-grantee districts this past year. Each district provided feedback and insight along with each component of their grant proposals, which included activities and supports for birth to 3, K-5, and 6th through 12th grade students, families, and educators. In this overview, we will share highlights from each district. Benton Harbor continues to have community outreach events and provide books to families. To support instruction, Benton Harbor Great Start Readiness Program, GSRP, teachers are currently receiving training in both letters and structured literacy development. In partnership with Michigan's Multi-Tiered Systems of Support Technical Assistance Center, the district also invested in new curriculum, which will lead into future data-based intervention work with the MyMTSS TA Center. Additionally, Benton Harbor continues to invest in training on the essential practices for disciplinary literacy for upper grade level educators. DPSCD has invested in books for classroom libraries and have implemented a program called Authors Panel, which brings authors to K-12 schools to vet books, which is accomplished through teacher and student scoring, which leads to an opportunity for principals to add these books into classroom libraries. To support instructional practices, DPSCD continues to use Orton Gillingham and letters training and has partnerships with the MyMTSS Center and Michigan Education Corps to provide resources and professional learning throughout their schools. Flint Community Schools has worked on building out a literacy team at the district and building level to support their literacy initiatives, and they are currently moving towards creating systems that support literacy content instruction. In addition to specific programming and curriculum materials throughout the district, Flint has focused on literacy essentials from birth to grade 12, with support from Michigan State University in identifying which essentials are the most beneficial to focus on. Across all grade levels, Muskegon Heights Public School Academy System has invested in professional development and books for classroom teachers and families, book vending machines, and stipends for teachers. Additionally, K-6 teachers are currently enrolling in Year 2 of letters throughout the district, and secondary teachers are encouraged to apply for training through MDE. Pontiac School District has been focusing on making sure that they have materials and resources for the literacy essentials and phonics-based instruction. Pontiac has also focused on increasing the number of books in classrooms, specifically diverse books, and purchasing storage materials. Additionally, in our ongoing work with all districts, we are continuing a focus on growing diverse classroom libraries and expanding our supports through collaborative and responsive site visits. Continuing our focus on students, families, and communities, and in collaboration with the MyMTSS Center, the department hosted an in-person literacy event for educators and administrators in March of this year, titled the MDE Diversity and Literature Symposium, The How and Why of Literacy. Opening with a keynote from Dr. Goldie Muhammad, the conference featured 18 breakout sessions focused on diversity in literature and the science of reading, and aligned to the literary pursuits of identity, skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. And concluded with an end note from Emily Hanford, who provided insights into the impact of instructional practices on student lifelong literacy learning. During the conference, over 600 attendees engaged in learning and reflections that included 2 sessions with award-winning author Angela Joy, a sampled diverse classroom library by our friends at MAISA, as well as an opportunity to browse and shop with the Lansing-based Black female-owned bookstore, Socialite Society, featuring popular titles aligned with the conference theme. A highlight of the symposium featured Michigan's brilliant young people, who shared their perspectives with a captive, standing-room-only audience during a panel discussion. During this session, Michigan's rising stars, our students, provided attendees with insights about their literary interests and shared advice for how educators can support students in a lifetime love of reading. In addition to the breadth and depth of learning opportunities offered, we are equally interested in the feedback from the over 600 attendees while attending the symposium. Overall, participants rated quality, relevance, and usefulness as high across all sessions, with an average rating of 2.8 out of 3 possible points. Additionally, most reported that their attendance was a priority of their organization, which were represented from ISDs throughout the state. Anecdotally, educators shared insights about presentation topics and delivery, which continues to inform our planning for the coming year's symposium, which will be held at the Lansing Center on March 7th of 2024. And at this point, I'll turn the presentation back over to Dr. Edwards for some closing information.
Thank you, Jen. As we conclude our presentation, we again reflect upon our foundational aspect of the Top 10 SCP vision. If every learner in Michigan's public schools is to have an inspiring, engaging, and caring learning environment that fosters creative and critical thinkers, then all students must have equitable access to high-quality instruction that embraces and celebrates each student, regardless as to his or her circumstances, providing multiple mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors across all content areas. Over the past year, the staff of the Office of Educational Support's Literacy Unit has intentionally focused work efforts on Goal 2. Moving forward, the MDE and the Office of Educational Support's literacy staff will continue to build upon the foundations and frameworks established through the how and why of literacy-focused learning, while using the momentum gained over the past year to propel us further in our efforts to improve early literacy achievement for our Michigan students. Again, Board, we thank you for the time today as we presented our updates over the year. At this time, we'll turn it back over to Dr. Chapman, Dr. Rice, and open it up for any questions that you may have for us. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Chapman, Dr. Edwards, Ms. Saylor. Mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors.
Yes.
It's a great way to end. Thank you. Who's up first? Board members? Ms. Snyder, Dr. Robinson.
We've talked about, the evidence of reading a lot, and I know that everybody has the right to read handout here that we were given before the board meeting started. We've talked about sold a story, the concept of direct explicit instruction rooted in encoding and decoding and all of the things that kids need that are rooted in the science of reading. And I know that I heard you say some things like, so that educators have solid evidence on how to teach reading, practical guidance to apply to existing curricula, but we need to kind of stop there, and I have a few questions rooted in that. Because teachers can't apply the evidence that we're talking about to curriculum that isn't also rooted in that evidence. You can in some, hodgepodge way, but it isn't the most effective, especially for kids that have issues with learning how to read. So like the Dyslexia Initiative talks about this and sort of breaks down letters training as something that we need to really consider more deeply. Let me just try to get to the point that I'm making here with letters training. It talks about how it's essentially agnostic to curricula. So, and curricula is a local school decision, and we know and understand that. So if we're doing letters training for some of our teachers, and I know that we talked about this in previous meeting, that not all are getting it, and we're not mandating it. And I don't know that we're even doing it at the collegiate level for every teacher that graduates moving forward. So if letters training is this evidence-based thought process on how to go back to the basics like that we had left decades ago, but then we're not using curriculum that is supportive of that, I'm wondering, are you reaching out to local school districts and encouraging them, whether they have teachers enrolled in letters or not, to encourage them to have their teachers enrolled in letters and to encourage them that their curriculum align with the science of reading? Not balanced reading, but that structured approach that works for every student.
Sure. Go ahead.
I can share that we have been doing outreach across. There are many ISDs and districts who are interested in letters, so we're providing as much information as we can. To answer the second part of your question, though, it continues to be a local controlled decision around which curriculum districts would adopt. But the Letters for Administrators course is also intended to help administrators have an understanding of how the curriculum can align to the content of letters.
Right.
I think that's the beauty of what we are doing, and particularly with the funding, the additional funding that I know Dr. Chapman has shared earlier, and we alluded to in the presentation. You do have to embed that foundational knowledge, right? So that you have that cadre of professionals who can gather in that space and really look at their intended learning outcomes for their students based upon their community thoughts and ideas and need, as well as a reflection of the instructional materials that they're going to use, which is why we're embedding in that piece to the push toward that, not only just the high quality instructional approaches, but high quality instructional materials, so that teachers have an understanding of what that is, what it looks like, and how that might manifest itself in the classroom.
So just to be more specific, because I think we're on the same page and we're saying the same things, but and I just want to make another generalized statement. So I appreciate the shift that we're moving in as a result of the things that we've learned, and there's groundswell, right, in media and in just reflection that like you're talking about. But without suggesting, at least, especially some of our school districts in Michigan are still using curriculum that is clearly not evidence-based, right? Dr. Calkins' curriculum is not good for kids in learning how to read. So especially dyslexic kids. So for those districts that are still using that curriculum, are you reaching out to them and saying, here are a few other curriculums you could try, these high instructional materials that would complement letters if you sent a handful of your teachers to it? Like really encouraging them to look at how those two things go together.
Again, we lean into our advocacy, understanding that we are a local control state. We really, really, really lean into our advocacy, which is why we continue to create documents and resources and push those as a part of the reflective process that needs to happen at the school district level. So if we can engage them further in conversation around how are you looking at the resources that you're using, how are you looking at what your learning objectives and your learning standards might be, reflectively, and putting those resources in front of them and saying, how does this align with that? How does this align? And asking those questions and continuously leaning into. So I agree with you in terms of, I think we're saying the same thing. We're advocating for those. And one of the other pieces that we're encouraged by is something that you mentioned earlier, the move to take this into the spaces and places where we're educating our future educators and getting that interest coming along from our HE professors who are saying, hey, we want to know, we want to learn, and are not afraid to sit side by side, elbow with us at the table and say, how can we create those spaces where we're starting to engage in those conversations very early on.
Thank you very much.
One last thing, sorry.
One last one.
So not to make any assumptions that you're not doing what you say you're doing. So if you could share with the board some of these letters that you're sending all of our local school districts, so that when parents come to us and say, I've still got a school district that's using this bad curriculum, what have you done about it? What have we collectively done about it? I'd like to point to those documents and say, this is what you should show your superintendent and local school board, because they should be asking these questions of themselves and answering them publicly. Okay, thank you.
To respond in a different way, 6,000 plus people have signed up for letters training. That is letters training that we are deeply engaged in, we are promoting, and the third, fourth, and fifth cohorts were greater than the first and second. So you can see a groundswell, and it's not disconnected from us. It is in part driven by us. So too, the money from the legislature to provide this training, respecting the fact that it is a local control state. Local school districts get to determine whether their educators will do the professional development or not, and what curricula their legislators use, and for that matter, their instructional practices. Dr. Robinson, Mr. McMillan.
This is a ton of work, so thank you very much for putting it all together in a digestible way. On slide number 9, my eyes are always drawn to big changes in numbers. And we see pre-test and post-test increases of almost 30% on some of these measures. I have a point and then a question. The pre-test N is nearly twice as large as the post-test N in both measures. And I guess my question is, it's an increase in what? I think it means it's an increase in knowledge by teachers of the content that they were trained on.
That's exactly right.
Right. So if I give my students a test about something they didn't know, and then ask them questions about that test, both before and after, I'm likely to find some improvement, right? But this is not saying that this is an increase in student learning.
That's correct.
Correct. This is the educator knowledge.
And the research on letters training shows that while teachers increase their knowledge of the letters content, their students have not shown significantly higher achievement in terms of learning reading compared to students in the control groups. And there are several studies that have shown that. So I just want to make sure that we know what we're looking at here. This is not a 67 to 92% increase in student learning about reading. This is saying that the letters training seems to be effective in teaching the content of letters training to the people that take letters training. And so one of my wonderings is this really about letters training and reading, or is it that most teachers know that most PD is pretty poor, right? We do a lot of PD that doesn't stick. It bounces off teachers because it's limited, it's one-shot deals, it's one day, it's at a conference, it's whatever. This is long-term, very intense, and very expensive, right? So I also am wondering, we've spent 14 million in 22-23, another 10 million is earmarked for 24, so that's $24 million that we're spending. Is this, you just talked about we're paying for the training. Are teachers having to do the training during the school day while they're being paid? Are they being expected to do this after school? Do they have to pay for it? I've seen GoFundMes from teachers to pay for their letters training, which, not in Michigan, I don't think, but which seems odd if states, North Carolina spent $54 million in the past couple of years on letters training, but teachers in North Carolina are running GoFundMes to pay for their letters training.
Let's back up.
Okay.
We don't advocate that teachers ever pay for their own professional development, let alone for letters training. That's
Right.
number one. Number two, we went to the legislature about funding associated with this PD so that there wouldn't be any out-of-pocket costs. The third thing is that the pre-test ends are greater than the post-test ends because some people, lots of people, haven't finished. And the reality is that the first cohort is due to end at the end of this calendar year. So this is very much a work in progress in the state. We don't advocate that everybody do this, but we do advocate that many do this, and we advocate that they do it for a host of reasons, not the least of which is that one-shot PD doesn't drive higher student achievement. The slide is labeled Letters Impact on Educator Learning because it's about educators, not the educated. But one hopes, one does not know, but one hopes that there is a movement from improved professional development of educators and then the student achievement of our young people. So that roughly gives you a sense of the answers associated with that. Do you have other questions, Dr. Robinson, before we move to Mr. McMillan and Ms. Jackson?
No, I'm happy to cede the floor.
Oh, you don't have to cede the floor, but I want to make sure that we did justice because you had several questions.
I did want just a little clarification. I'm glad that teachers are not paying out of pocket. Are they getting the training during the school day? Or are they expected to do online modules after school, virtually, et cetera?
They're typically doing it outside of the school day, and it's self-paced. So it's a lot of the online learning is, as I just said, self-paced. And then there's communities of practice that come together with fellow educators with a component called Bridge to Practice, where they're practicing in their classrooms with some of the skills and knowledge that they're getting in the letters training, which also I think has an impact on the fact that they're not finished. So we're midstream. We're not finished with cohort 1 yet. So it's hard to say right now the impact on children and their learning because teachers are literally just practicing it in the moment. So it's just another side note on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then there just one other reflection about the training. We have not fully expended those dollars. We've not started fiscal year 24. We've not fully expended fiscal year 23 funds. So there's still quite a bit of there left. Mr. McMillan, Ms. Jackson.
This letters training, I just want to make sure kind of the bigger picture. Is this the focus on this training due to an acknowledgement that there was flawed training of teachers on how to do reading for a long time, for decades perhaps, and that now there is a shift towards phonics, intensive phonics, and away from 3Qing or look-say or any of this? Is that kind of the bigger picture? Is that that this intensive training going on is due to something that was a flaw in their training?
If you could, if we could turn back to page 3, slide 6, Scarborough's reading rope, and perhaps in 60 seconds, review the top of the rope, because I think Mr. McMillan has spent a great deal of time focusing on the bottom of the rope, and the bottom of the rope is very important. But the point of letters training is that that we're weaving these strands together. So it's a much stronger emphasis on the decoding on the one hand, but also a strong emphasis on the comprehension as well.
Do you want to add that? Okay, but that's not my question. My question is this being done because there was they lack information, teachers did, the way they've been taught, and so now there's a new understanding of the science of reading, or, that's it's just a real simple, I don't want to go into a lot of...
There's a feeling that we can improve the professional development of teachers around DLA, and by extension, the outcomes for young people around DLA.
Okay, because and we got, maybe it was just providential, we got an email, or I got an email from a former teacher here in Michigan. She just heard this sold a story on the Associated Press, and just, was devastated in basically how education has been done with flawed reading, and that it was not intensive phonics based. And then I went down a rabbit hole because I saw that we had a slide that said sold a story. So I did some Googling while here, and I saw, I was reminded about the NAACP in Oakland, how they were really going back to phonics and pushing it. The New York Times seems to be the Hechinger report is saying, that, made a big deal about this as well, and really lambasting kind of this Lucy Calkins curriculum. And I am also reminded, though, should we be going back and looking at ELA standards? I know Common Core, during those Common Core battles, a lot of it was, there's not much phonics in here. It's going to harm children. I was involved in the phonics versus look-say and all that back in the 90s. I remember these battles, and how we said what would happen would be is ELA and math scores would be, devastated, and kids are not going to be able to learn well and learn to read well. And I guess we don't have to say "told you so," but is it Hechinger report? I saw that there was an article about this sold a story, and the first people blasting it was a bunch of professors at colleges that I'm sure have, feel bad, if they were honest with themselves, that they've been teaching teachers wrongly, and that millions of children are illiterate or can't read well because of them. But I think that we need to look at our standards, maybe soon, maybe quickly, because if this is this big of an impact, if kids, could be reading better, with better standards, then maybe we should look at that. We should maybe be hauling in teaching university staff before us, or professors or department heads, and asking, what are you doing differently now based on the new understanding or science of reading, or, what we've been doing wrong. Are you still doing the wrong thing, or have you changed abruptly so that our kids will have the harm will be lessened? Reduced as much as possible. So I think that there's some immediate things that we could be doing. It sounds like this letters might be a step in the direction, but I think it's coming from the left and the right. It's not a partisan issue. It seems like there's a real understanding that things have been wrong, and getting them right shouldn't be phased in. Let's get them right now and going forward.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jackson, you're our benediction.
All right, I'll try to keep it short so that we can all have lunch. As the presenter said, Detroit Public Schools Community District, we are a part of the Michigan Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, and we have been doing letters training for a couple of years now, and most of the teachers in my building and the academic interventionists and paraprofessionals, they have had this training, or they're in the process of having the training. And I know that on page 9, it spoke to teacher data, but in my building, we actually disaggregated and isolated the data for testing in the spring of our students, where we took the students who were receiving the letters, receiving the intervention from interventionists who were providing the letters training, and they actually outperformed the students who were not getting it. So, not saying that it's empirical data, but in my building at least, it really did have an effect. The students who got it, they outperformed the students who did not get it. So, just that. And then my other concern, as I provide the benediction, is that kind of going to what Ms. Tilly said, we've put a lot of money into literacy, and I'm concerned, although I do think that this literacy stuff is great, and I approve everything that you guys are doing. I'm just curious what is doing or what is being provided for math, because all of this money was pushed and all of this training has been provided to the academic interventionists in my district for ELA. But when you ask what are we doing for math, at least in my district, it's nothing. And the teachers are crying out saying, well, we need more intervention for math. And then some principals have said, okay, we'll provide intervention for math, but the academic interventionists are not prepared to do it. They're ill-equipped to do it because they don't have the training. So I would urge the state of Michigan to consider increasing the funding for math achievement, if that's possible. Maybe have like a number 9 on the top 10.
Well, the state legislature has added funding in fiscal year '24 for math, in effort to push the math essentials, to push math professional development. I think you'll be seeing more of that in the coming months. Did I see it? Oh, okay. All right. This is the post benediction.
I wish I had a button I could push that could light up over there so you could see me. But before Tom mentioned phonics, I wanted to comment on that as well. How are we looking? Because I know that we've spoken about this before, that we've gotten away from phonics. And it's not just been a state push, it was a national push to go to whole language. But how are we looking in the state now that more people have come to the realization that we should not have moved away from phonics the way that we did, and that phonics works? How is that being received? I know some districts are changing that. How are we looking in the state, and is there anything that we can do as a state board to help to promote and push phonics?
So this is not a push of phonics. This is a push of a multi-pronged approach. Letters
But
training.
part of that is phonics, correct?
Part of it is phonics, but the entirety thereof is not. That phonics makes up a portion of the word recognition on that rope, the bottom half of that Scarborough's reading rope. So it's a portion of the bottom half. It's not the entirety of the bottom half, and it's not the entirety of the rope itself. The second half is language comprehension.
And thank you for the clarity on that. However, with phonics, that is something that I think is a serious issue that could definitely help.
The coding is hugely important, and what we know is that if the children don't have a strong foundation initially, they're not going to be strong readers. But what we also know is that the strong foundation by itself is not going to make them strong readers. That in addition to the how of reading, there has to be the increasing why of reading. That we've got to do a better job in terms of engaging young people, in providing literature to them that connects with them, that interests them, that excites them, that gets them into books. Because what we know is that the more they read, the more fluency, the more vocabulary, the more knowledge becomes prior knowledge as they attack each new text. So it's a combination of improving the how and improving the why. And that's why we talk not only about the letters training, the federal grant work that we've done, the dyslexia guidance that we've done, the literacy essentials, but we also talk about diversity in literacy as well. Because we believe that there are many kids that are competent readers, they're just not interested readers. And if you don't read a lot, you don't practice a lot. If you don't practice a lot, you don't develop the fluency, the vocabulary, the knowledge to become fully proficient.
So are we not doing anything specifically with phonics?
We are. The letters training is a
So
piece
that's
of
a
that.
piece of that.
So
So
volume
how,
one-
and maybe your staff can better answer that, how are we seeing, are we seeing a shift in our districts moving more towards phonics and away from the whole language?
Are you saying from a curriculum standpoint, or
Yes.
how? We're starting to have conversations to get an understanding of maybe where districts are, but again, it's a local control. You know, we can't push something in one direction or the other, emphasizing the fact that a curriculum, like Dr. Rice said, that focuses on that word recognition portion of the rope, along with the language comprehension, would be the most comprehensive and in alignment with the science of reading.
Well, and that's why this training is so important, even with a piece of phonics. I think there should be more of a focus on phonics so that they can understand how important it is inside the curriculum.
And there is it's significant, the understanding of how the brain processes language and, decodes the sound symbol correspondence. There is a significant portion of it, so that as educators, we have a strong understanding of how that processing happens for emerging readers. And then again, with the second portion of it, so that the letters volume 2, it gets into that vocabulary and that background knowledge and the comprehension components.
But to your point, leaning into that building knowledge base from the educator's perspective, so that they understand what they need to advocate for, and then have the power to advocate within their district to move toward the adoption of those types of curricular resources that will help for them to implement what they now understand to be best practice.
Absolutely, and that's more of what I'm saying. I know it's local control. I know we can't at this point say that you have to have phonics, but that leaning in and really making sure there's a deep understanding of why it's beneficial and why it's best practices for our district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tilley.
Mr.
Presenters,
Chapman, Dr. Chapman is trying to say something.
please.
Ms. Tilley, and also to Ms. Snyder, just so you all are aware, when we say lean in, we have been consistent with providing communication to the field very specific to not only letters training, but as districts consider the professional development component, what is it that they can do as local control districts relevant to high-quality instructional materials? So we do have memorandums that speak to and encourage and influence our LEAs to couple what's available with the training with what they would be doing as on task within the district with their educators to make those changes. So I just wanted to share that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, presenters. It is 12:17 Board. State Board of Education will stand adjourned for lunch. We will re-begin at 1:10 p.m. Thank you very much.